to join, and then we will get started.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. It's 10:01, so I think we'll jump in. We have quite a bit of information to cover, but mainly we want to make sure we give everyone the opportunity to ask questions about this exciting program. That's the point of this informational webinar. So good morning. My name is Sophie Cardona. I'm a senior project manager at NYSERDA, managing this PON. And I want to welcome everyone to the informational webinar for the Empire Building Challenge Real Estate Partnerships PON. I apologize if there's drilling noise in the background. They just started construction on my building this morning, actually, installing solar panels on the roof. So I will, I've closed all windows and doors, and unfortunately there's nothing more I can do. So apologies for that background noise. Hopefully it's not too distracting. So that said, this initiative has been a long time in the making. It was announced at the Governor's State of the State address at the beginning of the year. And here we are today, very excited to have this challenge on the street, and also very grateful that all of you are interested enough to join us this morning. Before jumping in, I want to again let you know, for anyone who didn't hear us talking prior to 10 o'clock, this webinar is being recorded, and we will post a recording on the program website as well as the Q&A. And when the time comes, please do put your questions in the chat, and we'll really try to get to all the questions. If we don't get to all of the questions, we'll again make sure to answer them and post the answers online. Okay, so the intention of the webinar is, as I said, to really allot as much time as possible to Q&A, and we've already received some questions that we'll be addressing today. But I'll start by providing an overview of the program. I'll go over proposal requirements and evaluation criteria, some definitions that will be important to keep in mind throughout, and then a little bit of information on the application process. And let me also just say that none of this replaces a very close and detailed read of the PON, the Program Opportunity Notice, which is PON 4498, a copy of which can be found on the NYSERDA website. And if you are planning on submitting a proposal, please read that document very intentionally. So what is the Empire Building Challenge? I want to start by quoting Doreen Harris, NYSERDA's acting president and CEO, because I think she put it very crystal clear. She said, quote, "The Empire Building Challenge lays the groundwork for the real estate community, developers, and solution providers to work together in making New York a hub for successful building retrofits while accelerating the state towards our ambitious goals of a completely carbon neutral building stock." Okay, so this is no small feat. This is a large initiative, a $50 million initiative $50 million to be committed in several phases. And we've taken a three-pronged approach to advancing that market for low carbon buildings in New York. Our first priority is working very closely with our real estate partners. And by establishing carbon neutrality commitments from real estate partners, we are hoping that the Empire Building Challenge will not only support the state's ambitious energy and climate goals, but really help establish the city as the low carbon retrofit capital of the world, right? So we're not being modest here, but that is really the vision for this initiative. And through these public-private partnerships, we really want to maximize private sector investments in building retrofits, create good jobs, and promote local economic development, all the while obviously reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. Secondly, we need to really engage solution providers and make sure they're at the table. So we want to recruit best-in-class solution providers, equipment manufacturers, and really all businesses to invest in the necessary innovation and product development, and then also the business development needed to overcome the barriers that prevent tall buildings from achieving carbon neutrality. And then none of this makes sense if it can't be replicated and scaled. And replicability and scale are words that we like to use a lot at NYSERDA, and for good reason, right? We need to demonstrate that these low carbon solutions can be replicated across the state's existing stock of tall buildings, which includes both commercial and multifamily buildings. And I'll define what we mean by tall buildings in a couple of slides. So let's see. So like I said, this is a multi-phase initiative. This PON is part one of this initiative. We're calling it the Real Estate Partnerships PON. And the first part is the solicitation, right? The Real Estate Partnerships PON is a competitive application process to establish partnerships between NYSERDA and leading portfolio owners and large tenants. Part two, which is expected to be released in the first quarter of next year, we've already started working on it, will also be a competitive process. That will be a competitive funding opportunity for low carbon retrofit proposals. And that funding opportunity will only be open to the partners that are qualified in part one, so the current solicitation. And through this process, we'll be allocating $5 million in design and implementation incentives for the low carbon retrofit proposals that will sort of be developed in the first part. And we have $25 million in total available for part two. So let's focus on part one, which is the subject of this PON. We are accepting or seeking applications from commercial and multifamily real estate owners, as well as large tenants, to become qualified Empire Building Challenge partners. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about tall buildings here, and we define a tall building for the purposes of this program as either 15 stories or more for a commercial building, 8 stories or more for a multifamily building, and we define a large tenant as any tenant occupying more than 50% of a tall commercial building. So 50% of a commercial building that's 15 stories or higher. Each partner that we select will have access to technical assistance funds up to $250,000 each, again, to help support the technical analysis and the planning work that will be required to develop the low carbon retrofit proposals and projects. And we have $2 million in total available for this PON. So again, just to be super clear, part one, the real estate partnerships PON, we have $2 million available for this, $250,000 for each partner for technical assistance. Part two, which is coming next year, will have $25 million available. So we fully expect that our real estate partners will work with a team of consultants and advisors that will commit to delivering the sound technical analysis needed to support these projects and create the roadmaps, right, for the low carbon retrofit projects that we'll see in the second phase. So jumping now to eligibility criteria, there are not that many eligibility criteria. We've tried to keep it as simple as possible. So every potential partner will have to make a public commitment that one or more of their buildings in New York State will achieve carbon neutrality by 2030, and at least one tall building, and that partner must own at least one tall building. So if commercial, 15 stories or higher, if multifamily, 8 stories or 8 stories or higher. Again, you know, we're thinking of 15 stories or higher for commercial buildings where commercial use is the primary use, and then multifamily 8 stories or higher where residential is the primary use. And if you're a large tenant, again, you need to occupy more than 50% of that tall commercial building. I want to just mention that all buildings that are submitted as part of the proposal need to be located in New York State and need to contribute to the system benefit charge on the electric side. Joint applications and partnerships are also very much encouraged should they lead to better proposals, right? More ambitious and innovative and replicable outcomes. So again, we're very happy to support partnerships wherever they make sense. And again, I hope you're not hearing too much drill-in because it's certainly distracting me. Okay, so as I mentioned, every partner can access up to $250,000 in funding for technical planning work needed to develop the roadmaps for the low carbon retrofit proposals. That then will open the door to the next part of the initiative that comes with up to $5 million in funding per partner for replicable and scalable low carbon retrofit proposals. And a reminder, this will be a competitive process. And we will also work closely with Empire Building Challenge partners to leverage as many utility incentives as possible, and we'll be very intentional in that support and making sure that we can coordinate with the partner utility account representatives as much as possible. And we'll promote our partners widely through all of our communications and marketing channels. So that's what you can expect as a partner if you're selected through this PON. So as a partner, there are a few things that we will ask of you by the end of Q2 2021. By the end of, halfway through next year, we'd want to see a roadmap to complete at least one significant low carbon retrofit project in at least one building of your portfolio by the end of 2024. We'll also look for your support in recruiting manufacturers and solution providers from around the globe to serve the New York low carbon retrofit market. We'll also ask that you make public the process and results of the low carbon retrofits funded through this program. And that would include, retrofit project economics, carbon and energy impacts of the retrofits, as well as case studies. And then we'll ask that you allow NYSERDA to include your low carbon retrofit projects in our promotional efforts and really cooperate with us in the creation and implementation of those efforts. The goal being to, broadly disseminate the lessons learned and the process that you would have gone through to develop these projects. So on to proposal requirements. This is, again, where I really urge you to go to the PON and read every single word, because every single word matters and is very important. I've literally copy pasted from the PON here for consistency and clarity. And I'll just expand a little bit on what the proposal requirements entail, but there are 8 requirements in total. And remember that the proposals are capped at 12 pages. Okay, so that we're not looking for long proposals, meaning that they really will need to be very thoughtful and concise. So number 1 is applicant description. This is pretty straightforward, right? This is where you tell us a little bit about yourself, your company history, the size of your portfolio, what types of buildings you have in your portfolio. If you have any multifamily buildings, do any of those have an affordable housing component? And any other information that will support your application. Number 2 is your track record. So, here tell us about your track record of investing in sustainability and building decarbonization. this is what this pond is all about, okay? So give us examples, details, metrics, really help us understand how you stand out and what you've done to date in this arena. Number 3 is carbon neutral buildings public commitment. This is one of the minimum eligibility criteria that I talked about. So again, be very thoughtful here. I suggest you spend time really thinking through what that commitment could look like. And this is where you have to provide us with your definition of what a carbon neutral building is. In a couple of slides, I will share what NYSERDA's definition is of a carbon neutral building. But as part of the proposal, we're asking our proposers to tell us what that definition is for them. This is where you'll include your targets, your site energy use intensity target below the 2010 baseline year, your target neutrality, your target year, which should be no later than 2035, and then also give us a description of your portfolio. The next requirement, number 4, this is where you can describe the building you will be advancing through the Empire Building Challenge. So tell us about these buildings. Are they multifamily buildings? Again, do they have an affordable housing component, commercial buildings? Just help us, give us a better picture of the buildings that you're thinking of advancing through the program. Number 5 is low carbon retrofit project concepts. Here, give us a conceptual overview of the retrofits that you think you might advance through part 2 of the program. So we obviously don't expect fully baked plans, but be thoughtful in the low carbon retrofit plans that you do submit, and really try to help us understand what your perspective and philosophy is and what you're thinking of. Number 6 is supply chain engagement. This is related to the development of our technology and solution provider network, which I mentioned at the onset of the presentation. So we're asking potential partners to share with us their thoughts on engaging with the supply chain market actors to advance innovation and emerging technologies in their portfolio. Number 7 is transparency. The driving force behind this initiative is the desire for replication and scaling of the retrofit solutions that come through this program, right? So a commitment to transparency is key. And we ask our partners to tell us exactly what that commitment means for them and what that will look like. And then number 8, the last requirement is to tell us which consulting partner you will be partnering with on this initiative, and that could be one or more partners. If it is more than one, please be sure to tell us the roles and responsibilities of each with a brief overview of their qualifications. Whoops, need to go one back. All right. So these are the definitions that I was mentioning. These are listed in the PON, obviously, but I just want to highlight them here because they are important. So for NYSERDA, we define affordable housing as a project in which at least 25% of the units are or will be occupied by households earning no more than 80% of the area or state median income, whichever is higher. All other properties are considered market rate. So I do want to mention that we have a number of proxies and approaches that we can use to qualify individual buildings as meeting this definition for affordable housing. We don't need to know the exact income breakdown of all of the tenants in the building. And if your building has a regulatory agreement, we can also work with that. So, just to say that if you do have affordable housing units that you think meets this definition, please let us know and include that in your proposal. The other definition that's important to keep in mind is the carbon neutral building definition that we use for the purposes of this program. We define a carbon neutral building as a building that is highly energy efficient and that does not contribute to emissions of greenhouse gases that cause climate change. this definition is in the PON. We also in the PON, excuse me, provide some primary attributes of a carbon neutral building. That would include a high performance building envelope, efficient equipment, the capability for load flexibility, right? So the building provides load flexibility through either electrical or thermal energy storage and load reduction through the recovery of waste thermal energy. Grid interactivity is another important component, and then clean energy. This is where the building can satisfy its load requirements from on-site or off-site emission-free energy sources. And I point that out specifically because we got some questions around the use of renewables and whatnot for the definition of carbon neutral buildings. Don't forget that as part of your proposal, you need to tell us what your definition of a carbon neutral building is, okay? All right. All right, I think I said everything here. So now moving on to the application process. There was if anyone saw the press release that came out from the governor's office a week ago now or so, it stated that October 22nd was the deadline for proposal submissions. That was an error. So the deadline for proposal submissions for this solicitation is October 29th, 2020. All proposals must absolutely be submitted by 3 p.m. on October 29th. There are absolutely no exceptions. And I say this, I say this very seriously because we are accepting applications electronically, and the electronic intake mechanism for these proposals closes automatically at 3 p.m. So don't wait until the last minute to upload your documents because you can plan on your computer crashing 5 minutes before the webinar, which is exactly, or the application, which is exactly what happened to me actually before getting on this webinar. But start your application early, go into the system, register, fill in all the required fields. Don't wait until the last minute. And I say this because we always have applications that don't make it for technical reasons, and if that happens, there is nothing that we can do. So anyway, not to belabor the point, but please do remember that applications are due by 3 p.m. on the 29th. All right, so a little bit more detail on the application process. As I mentioned, it is an online application process. The proposal should be no more than 12 pages long. Make sure it's a font. We don't specify font size in the PON, but please don't submit a proposal that is single spaced with Times New Roman 8-point size font, right? That will not be helpful. So anyway, 12 pages on the proposals, and you can include appendices if you need to. In order to submit your application, the easiest way is to go to the program website. So nycerta.ny.gov/EBC. You scroll to the bottom of that page, you'll see the how to apply section. Just click on that link. That'll take you to the application portal. You'll have to register for the portal. And then after that, you're in and you can fill out all required fields and upload your documents. All right, so last but not least, I'm going to talk a little bit about the evaluation criteria for this PON, and then we'll go to the Q&A. So this is a competitive application process, as the name implies. NYSERDA will convene a technical evaluation panel to review all of the proposals, which will be scored and evaluated against one another, okay? Again, I encourage anyone who applies to this program to look at these evaluation criteria very closely and understand how competitive your proposal might be based on these criteria. And you'll notice that the evaluation criteria are mapped very closely to the proposal requirements, obviously. So the first criteria is square footage. We'll be evaluating how large your portfolio's footprint is both from the standpoint of the total square footage of real estate that you include in your public commitment to carbon neutrality, as well as the total square footage of your portfolio. We want to see a robust commitment to the goals of the Empire Building Challenge. So how significant is the square footage that you're bringing to the program is obviously something that matters. Next, we'll be evaluating the proposer's track record when it comes to investing in building decarbonization and energy efficiency. And we'll be looking at how the applicant has demonstrated an exemplary and clear track record of making such investments, looking at those examples and evaluating how compelling those are. The third evaluation criteria is the level of ambition and specificity in the proposer's goals. So how aggressive is your target for site energy use intensity reduction? How bold is your ambition, right? Are you really a leader? But also how detailed and specific is the proposal? This is also where your definition of carbon neutral buildings will come into play. Are you proposing a sound definition for carbon neutral buildings? And the strategies that you're proposing for achieving those carbon neutral buildings, right? Either from a portfolio or a single building approach. Is this well articulated? How detailed is your approach? And how realistic is the carbon neutrality target year? These are all things that we'll be evaluating in this category. The fourth evaluation criteria is the thoughtfulness and quality of the conceptual low carbon retrofit proposal. So, what are the key decarbonization barriers that you're proposing to overcome with your project? Is the project integrated in a broader portfolio effort? How scalable and replicable are these projects? Again, this is something that's really at the center of the initiative. We're looking for well-conceived and audacious low-carbon retrofit proposal concepts, right? So this is what will illustrate your commitment to the Empire Building Challenge's mission, and whether projects have the potential of advancing emerging technologies within your portfolio, or more broadly speaking, in the marketplace, is also something that we'll be taking into consideration. Transparency, as I mentioned earlier, is also important. So to what extent is the proposer willing and able to work with NYSERDA to make information about the low carbon retrofit projects, public, right, and accessible to stakeholders in the real estate industry to drive broader adoption of new technologies and really bolster the solution providers in the New York market. We also have a set of program policy factors. I'm not going to go over them here. They are listed on page 8 of the PON in the evaluation criteria section of the PON, which is section 7. I encourage all of you to go there and look at those policy factors to, again, round out this whole approach to how we're evaluating the proposals. All right, I think that's it on the evaluation criteria. Yes. So for all program questions after this webinar, hopefully you've been typing in your questions in the chat, but for any program questions after the webinar, please send them to this email address. This is all of the questions will go straight to the Empire Building Challenge inbox. And that will be an easy way for us to compile all of the questions and make sure we can get the answers out to everybody. All right, so now we are ready for our Q&A. I'll just remind everyone that the webinar is being recorded and we will post it online. And before we jump in, I do want to introduce Michael Reed, who's the team lead at NYSERDA overseeing this initiative, as well as Jared Rodriguez and Adam Hinge, both trusted Empire Building Challenge program advisors, and I will invite them all to help me answer questions as they come. We did receive some questions over the last several days, so I'll start with those. And again, as I mentioned, if we can't get to all of the questions today, we will answer them offline and again, post all of the answers on the web page for everyone's benefit. Okay, so just quickly look at the chat here. All right, so
Sophie, this is Michael. Would you like me to start reading the questions that we have?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, and Sophie, I'm going to start with the questions that we received before the webinar, which we've got in our SharePoint document. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
All right. So the first question is, are there any specific technologies your program is focused on, or is it open to a broad variety of energy efficiency solutions?
Right, so we're really, through this program, we're really open to all solutions, all potential solutions. Obviously, we are primarily focused on building energy retrofit solutions that will advance deep carbon emissions reductions, right? That is the stated goal of this solicitation. And this can include, HVAC, power motors, envelope, or other building systems to advance those deep emissions reductions. The scalability and replicability of those technologies and solutions is also something of importance. And as carbon neutral buildings eventually will require no on-site fossil fuel generation, technologies that can move a building, building heating and domestic hot water toward an electric alternative are also central to this equation, right? Especially approaches that address load shaping and grid-friendly technologies, such as thermal storage, for instance, that minimize peak impacts. But we certainly encourage innovative solutions of all kinds and different means and methods that can really encompass broader initiatives to achieve the definition of carbon neutrality that each proposer will be including as part of their proposal.
Great, thanks. Next question. Will there be a separate solicitation process to identify technology and solution providers?
Yeah, so we certainly have been getting lots of inquiries from solution providers on this solicitation. We certainly didn't provide a lot of information on that topic specifically in the PON, because the PON is not focused on, the PON is really meant to, select this cohort of real estate partners that we'll be working with. So we are at this point really working very hard to develop what that engagement strategy will look like, to ensure that we have a broad, diverse, and well-qualified network of solution providers that we can engage in this work. At this point, I'll say the easiest way to express your interest is to send an email to the email address that's posted on the screen right now, ebc@nycerta.ny.gov. And we'll make sure to keep you posted and to include you in any communications moving forward for how we'll be engaging our solution provider network in this work.
Okay, next question. Is there a preference for multifamily versus commercial properties? And is there a preference for mixed use properties that contain multifamily versus properties whose primary use is multifamily?
So the answer is no. With this PON, we are really just laser focused on selecting the highest quality applications. However, if you are submitting a proposal for multifamily buildings, the extent to which those multifamily buildings contain affordable housing, that would have a favorable impact on the evaluation of your proposal. And this is per the program's policy factors, which are included in the PON.
Great. Are renewable energy credits and carbon offsets acceptable strategies for this PON, or are they excluded as part of the strategy for achieving carbon neutrality for high-rise buildings?
Right, it's a good question. I think to answer this question, I would refer anyone back to the definition that we have of carbon neutral buildings in the PON, which does call out clean energy as a primary attribute, obviously, of the carbon neutral building. We welcome new definitions of what a carbon neutral building is from the proposers, and that is an integral part of the proposal requirements.
Okay, so we've got a question which you've already addressed, but I just want to ask it again because it's important. Does participation in this PON preclude participation or the ability to acquire incentives from utility or NYSERDA programs?
The short answer is no. We are participating with partnering with NYSERDA on this program does not preclude you from obtaining incentives from other sources. We will actually work with the selected partners closely to make sure that that there's a maximum leverage of any existing utility incentive, and that can include clean heat incentives, and we'll offer our support in obtaining those incentives and coordinating with a partner utility account representative. And this is a stated, again, benefit for the partners that we state in the PON.
Does size and scale of the portfolio impact the selection of partners? For example, would a large owner that shows a commitment in a single building be considered with more favor than a single building owner that makes a commitment in a single building, assuming all else is equal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think I answered that question during the presentation. Sort of refer folks back to the evaluation criteria listed in Section 7 of the PON. The first two evaluation criteria are the total square footage of New York real estate covered by the applicant's public commitment to carbon neutrality, and then total square footage of New York real estate within the applicant's building portfolio, right? Whether that be commercial or residential. So the size of the portfolio does matter. And, additionally, one of the program's policy factors is that the square footage impacted by the proposed buildings will have an impact on the evaluation of the proposal, and the potential for scale and replicability are also important factors to consider in that criteria.
So there was a question about Long Island or PSE&G territory. Are they eligible to participate? And just going to say it, only buildings that contribute to the electric systems benefit charge can be included in proposals. So sadly, Long Island buildings are not going to be eligible for this program. Next question, will NYSERDA accept joint applications?
Yeah, so as mentioned, we certainly are happy to accept joint applications and consider partnerships and collaborations between landlords and tenants, landlords and solution providers. The whole point, that I'd like to stress is that the partnership should encourage and really lead to more ambitious and bold proposals. And if that is the case, and the partnership does that, then we will certainly be happy to support that. So yes, joint applications are acceptable.
So there's a question, now we're getting into the questions that we've received during this webinar. And the next question is, can carbon neutrality include RECs and VER from outside of Zone J?
So we are asking partners that are proposing to the solicitation, again, to provide their own definition of carbon neutrality. That is, a key part of this proposal. And the level of ambition is an important evaluation criteria, right? So, RECs from outside of Zone J could be a part of the proposer's definition if desired. And again, we'll be evaluating proposals against one another, so that's just something to keep in mind. We also recognize that potential partners have a desire to comply with other local laws, like Local Law 97, which mandates recs that originate in Zone J as well. So kind of looking at the whole picture.
Next question, is this program only available to private sector buildings?
So as the POM states, the program is open to owners of multifamily residential buildings, commercial office buildings, and large office tenants that pay into the system's benefit charge. It's a pretty straightforward definition. If you, to whoever asked this question, I would say if you have any specific sectors that you're considering, or maybe if you want to provide, sort of a follow-up question, you could certainly include it in the chat or email it to the program inbox, and we can provide more detailed answer there.
Next question. Why is there a time frame for achieving carbon neutrality rather than a hard deadline year? What penalties are there for achieving carbon neutrality past 2035?
I think I'll open this question up to either Jared or Adam, or you, Michael, if you want to take that one.
We are relying on, so NYSERDA does not have authority to penalize anyone. That's part of why people tend to like us. And the purpose of this initiative is to form public-private partnerships and demonstrate replicable solutions. So we are relying on applicants to define their target year for achieving carbon neutrality.
This is Jared. Just to add to that comment, there are a number of potential applicants that might have internal ESG requirements or sustainability requirements. We recognize that if an applicant were to go public with a particular target or goal, and then sort of renege on that target, it may not look great in the public sphere. So this is one of the reasons why we're asking applicants to commit to publicly announcing their targets, because it's really our only way that we can hold your feet to the fire.
Thanks, Jared. Next question. We've already talked about this a little bit, but just because we're getting a lot of these questions, how will technology and solution providers be chosen by building owners?
So that is really completely up to the proposer to define. We, as part of the requirements of this program, we ask each potential partner to submit, to come in as a team, basically, right? To submit the name of consulting firms that they're planning on working with for this effort. Or at least the first part in terms of developing roadmaps for those low carbon retrofit projects. So, it really is completely up to the real estate partner to identify the consulting firms that they wish to work with.
And I could probably add some additional information to that as well. This is a partnership between the partner, the state of New York, and the partners team. So therefore, NYSERDA and our Empire Building Challenge team, will be helpful in the implementation phase. And so again, keep in mind, right, this is a partnership, and we will be part of your implementation team, and therefore we will be there to recommend solutions and make introductions to solution providers as necessary.
Thanks, Jared.
Okay, next question. Does the appendix count towards the 12-page limit for the application?
So So no, well, let's see, does not count. Okay, double negative always confuse me. So yes, I mean, you have a 12-page limit for the proposal. In addition to the 12 pages, you can submit appendices. I would encourage everyone to think carefully about what you're including as an appendix, and including 20 appendices is not going to help your cause. So yes, it's 12 pages plus the appendices.
How will carbon neutrality be measured? A really meta question for you, Sophie.
So it will be measured, quote unquote, or really determined and by the proposer's definition of carbon neutrality. Again, we go back to this question of really asking each proposer to think very carefully about what their definition of carbon neutrality means for their portfolio or building, and to weave that into their entire proposal. As noted in the PON, a more detailed definition of carbon neutrality, and obviously a more ambitious one, will be considered in the evaluation of the proposal.
So the next question is, why is there a focus on portfolios? Why exclude buildings such as large Class A commercial buildings that have made large greenhouse gas emissions reductions, but are not part of a portfolio?
Yeah, so we're not excluding any buildings from being included in these applications. We are, we're looking to work with owners or potential partners that have control over a large portfolio, given our desire to really, be able to replicate solutions on a broader basis. So, again, I'll just go back to these concepts of scalability and replicability, which are really, underpinning the work that all of the work that we do at NYSERDA. So we just want to, we're interested in working with partners that have just larger portfolios, where that replicability can be more evident. But we're seeking partners that have a large market presence, again, in order to advance this, to advance market transformation, right? So again, that goes to scale, the ability to scale and to replicate solutions across a broader number of buildings.
The other thing, the other qualifier, I guess that could be considered is the fact that there may be potential partners submitting what we would consider to be like iconic buildings, very well-known buildings by the public. And in that case, if there was a portfolio owner that owned one building, and it was very large and it was very iconic, that would be a welcome proposal. Though, we're not saying that anyone can't submit any either portfolio or single building of any typology, as long as it meets the requirements of the POM.
Yeah, correct. Thanks.
So there's a question about mechanics of application. So for entities that own multiple buildings, can they submit applications for each building, or is it limited to one application?
That's an interesting question. I would say you submit one application for your building/portfolio to the program.
Yeah, we understand, right? So we understand that each building entity is likely different, right? There's a whole slew of LLCs that are floating around there. We know that, though we do recognize that there is likely a single corporate or umbrella entity that has control over those individual building entities. So, we'd like to see more buildings enrolled in this program. That's a goal. But we don't want to see many applications on behalf of individual building entities just because they've got, you know, a different business entity.
Next question. Is there a minority or women-owned business participation requirement?
There is not for this program.
Next question. In an attempt to be both ambitious and realistic about our proposals, roughly what state of an emerging technology qualifies as realistic? For example, white paper level case study installations common outside of the US?
Yeah, so obviously striking that balance is an imperative. I mean, we are interested in really looking at all potential solutions at varying levels of technological readiness and levels of commercialization. You know, that said, we certainly recognize that most owners are going to be more comfortable with deploying solutions that already have a history of commercial success, right? So I think, you know, to the extent possible, if your proposal can, you know, try to strike that right balance and certainly acknowledge the tension there, that would be worthwhile.
We have a strong desire to import commercialized technologies that are readily available outside the US. So to the extent that there are, you know, fully commercialized technologies that are deployed in other countries, that we can make connections with manufacturers or suppliers to bring that technology here where it currently doesn't exist. You know, we're really looking to make those kinds of efforts happen. So again, you know, if there is an opportunity that you're aware of as an applicant, by all means include that in your proposal, because we're very interested in that. You know, the other point I think to make here is that we recognize that a number of building owners are involved with business development for some of these technologies in the property technology space and in the energy technology space. Some of these building owners participate in venture capital. To the extent that we can leverage those kinds of relationships to deploy new tech in buildings is highly desirable as well. So in your appendices or in the application, you know, please make reference to that if you have these relationships existing.
Next question. For proposals that are New York City based, will local law 97 compliant RECs and carbon offsets count toward the carbon neutral goal? Will there be caps on either?
Right, so again, kind of, you know, bringing everyone back to this notion that we're asking all proposers to submit their own definition of carbon neutral buildings. We'll accept your definition of a carbon neutral building as put forth in your proposal, and whether or not you decide to incorporate local law 97 requirements into that definition is again up to each proposer.
And then to add to that, Sophie, the evaluation criteria makes fairly clear where the points of emphasis are for this program, and all applications are going to be compared to one another.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for reminding everybody.
So can you provide a further definition of detailed plans as part of the phase 1 deliverables? For example, I would envision that a detailed plan is more than a 3-page summary, but probably not 95%, you know, complete construction drawings.
Yes, so we're not going to require 95% CDs. You know, we'll certainly expect more than a brief summary. So somewhere in the middle, which is a range. But the specifics of these detailed plans, you know, will be finalized in partnership with the selected real estate partners, right? So, think about balancing the desire to move low carbon retrofit projects quickly, but then also recognizing the need to fit into building capital planning cycles as well. So there's a need to have at least one significant low carbon retrofit project for each partner completed by the end of 2024. So, thinking of those timelines and including those timelines in the proposal, which is part of the proposal requirements, is important and something to certainly think about.
But we definitely recognize that this is conceptual phase, right? And that these plans need to be further finessed and analyzed with a consulting team. So we're not asking you to have a fully fleshed out project to be included in this proposal. That's for phase 2 after you've become a partner.
This is Adam Hinch. Just one other clarification on that. These plans, are not just necessarily the engineering plans, but also some sort of a roadmap of how the projects that might be done in stages would fit into the building's equipment replacement and other parts of the capital planning cycle.
Okay, next question. Would participation in the New York City Carbon Challenge, and I believe our friend Sam Mann from New York City Mayor's Office of Sustainability is on this webinar and maybe even ask this question. But the question is, would participation in the New York City Carbon Challenge satisfy the public commitment requirement?
Good question. So, again, we're asking our partners to tell us in their proposals what their public commitment will be. And if this happens to align with other public commitments that they have going on, whether it be through the New York City Carbon Challenge or others, then that's great. It doesn't have to be a separate commitment, but we do want to know, we do want a very clear public commitment as part of the proposal as to what that means for that particular proposer.
Next question, will you, NYSERDA, provide us with a menu of solution providers who have expressed interest? And I think the answer here is no. If you are a potential applicant who is looking for solution providers, please reach out to EDC and we're happy to point you to publicly available lists, etc. But this is a competitive application process, so as such, we really don't want to do, NYSERDA doesn't want to take any actions that could, favor one applicant over another at this time. The next question is just to clarify, we say for multifamily buildings, is it more than 8 stories or 8 stories and above that are eligible to apply?
Yeah, thank you for that clarifying question. So it's an 8-story multifamily building would be eligible, so 8 stories or more.
Great. Is a solution provider able to submit an application? Is a solution provider able to be associated with multiple applications from different real estate owners?
Yes, I mean, there's nothing in the pond that states that is not acceptable. Again, as part of this solicitation, the applications are submitted by the real estate actors, right? By the real estate portfolio owners. And if a solution provider happens to be selected to be the partner on multiple proposals that are submitted by multiple proposers, then that is just fine.
If a building can be highly energy efficient and 100% electric, is it sufficient to rely on the grid becoming zero carbon in the future?
So for the purposes of this solicitation, being 100% electric and highly efficient would be sufficient. You know, we're not making it the responsibility of the selected or potential partners to impact how clean the grid is. You know, we would, however, encourage really innovative or aggressive approaches to procuring clean power in that case.
And just to make this point really clear, the state has on the books a goal of, and this is statewide, 70% renewable power by 2030, and then 100% carbon-free power by 2040. We take those goals very seriously. We're working very hard to achieve them. And we want and encourage building owners to focus on the decisions and investments that are within their control. And we, you know, generally don't see the electric grid as something that a building owner has a lot of control over. Will NYSERDA publish detailed proposal scoring information which can better inform proposers on the best candidates for this program?
The short answer is no. The evaluation criteria and the program policy factors are all listed black and white in the PON, obviously, but the any scoring information will not be published or made public.
If carbon neutrality is not achieved by 2035, can NYSERDA withdraw incentives committed to the partners?
A short answer is no. We would not withdraw incentives that have been already committed.
And also just to note, by 2035, you know, we expect the projects to be complete and paid out. So that it would be hard to withdraw capital from a complete project.
So this is an interesting question. Would fuel for emergency power, such as a diesel fuel for generation, be exempt from the fossil fuel elimination goal if required by code?
So if diesel emergency generators are required by codes, I think that would be exempt. And there's nothing in the solicitation that is intended to exempt a building from any health or life safety codes, obviously. So, so there.
Is it possible to share the list of attendees as a matchmaking opportunity between providers and owners?
To share the list of attendees as a matchmaking opportunity between present, right? So let's see. As we know,
no, we're not going to be sharing the list of attendees. Sorry.
I listed attendees. Okay, good. Yeah, I misunderstood that question.
I mean, this is, this is like any other RFP that a building owner would run. We don't often let everyone know who's bidding, because that could affect the outcomes of the proposals.
Will interested projects be disqualified from Empire Building Challenge if they enroll in FlexTech before applying to Empire Building Challenge? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We want you to use FlexTech. How important is fund matching from real estate owners? So this is asking, how important is it that applicants bring private capital into these proposals and potential projects?
How important is fund matching from real estate owners? So let's see, we recognize that more aggressive projects will certainly occur if private capital can be leveraged, but we'll also make an effort to identify with the partners other sources of capital or funding to make these projects happen. So
Michael,
It's important.
maybe it's worth.
Yeah, no, this is
yeah,
part of the application. I mean, there's no way that a tall building is going to achieve carbon neutrality without bringing third-party capital to bear on their building. Like we can't achieve these goals just with public funds. That's a big reason why we're running this program.
Maybe it's worth just briefly discussing how we could be leveraging utility funds as well, including other programs from NYSERDA.
And that's fine, but it's just you're still not going to get to carbon neutral if you're just using public ratepayer funds.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what we're saying is we can't avoid the need for private capital to be included in the program.
Right, so just checking the chat here to see if there are any additional questions that are coming through. All right.
So there's a question, Sophie, about supply chain engagement requirements. And I think, again, at this point for this phase 1 pond, we're really looking for applicants who are aligned with the goal of the program. How supply chain engagement will look once we have selected our partners will be decided in coordination and partnership with our real estate partners. We are most interested in building decarbonization. So investments that help reduce fossil fuel use, increase efficiency and flexibility of behind the meter energy systems. So that is going to be the emphasis. But we're wanting to be very open-minded to what the needs are of the real estate community and work in partnership with our partners to execute the supply chain engagement strategy.
Great, and I think we have one or two more. When will selected entities be notified that they have been accepted into the program or denied? So applications are due on October 29th. We'll need, 2 weeks to kind of review proposals and evaluate them. So I'd say
by
probably
the end of the year, people will know by the end of the year. That's what we can commit to at this point.
Okay. All right, just scrolling through and picking up some additional questions in the chat. Just bear with us one moment.
Yeah, I think, Sophie, we might want to just take these last minute questions offline and we will, we can email everybody who has signed up for this webinar with, official answers on Q&A. So keep on submitting your questions, but given that we're already a bit over time, we can wrap up unless there's other questions that the team wants to respond to right now.
Yeah, I mean, it might be worth just quickly addressing Con Edison Steam, like Con Edison District Energy, and whether or not we would require within this program a phase out of
right.
that.
So again, we're
district
not requiring anything. We're asking applicants to put forward their definition of carbon neutrality, and certainly greenhouse gas emissions associated with the operation of the Con Ed steam system are something that will need to be addressed in this application. I don't know what else we really want to say about the Con Ed steam system at this point, but Jared or Adam, do you have anything you'd like to add?
This is Adam. Nothing additional to add. I would ask maybe for a clarification. There was a question that came in on site energy use intensity target below 2010 baseline year. It's not quite clear what the question is there. So if the person who asked that question about site energy use intensity target could kind of clarify what your question is, we may be able to answer it.
Yeah, and it's just worth noting, right? Like we are allowing the applicant to define how aggressive they want to be in this program via their definition of carbon neutrality, right? So the applicant is putting forward definitions. If you want to choose a 2010 base year, you know, great. It's up to the applicant to define, you know, how they're going to proceed with this program. Knowing that this is highly competitive, we're selecting just a handful of partners for this round. It behooves the applicant to be as aggressive as possible in their definitions.
This is Adam. I will just add one more thing on the question about desire to phase out fossil fuel use on site and a similar effort to phase out steam use in the building. I think that comes back to the same point about level of ambition in your definition, that, you know, we understand that it's not any building owner's responsibility to clean the entire electric grid, and similarly, it's not any individual building owner's responsibility to sort out the replacement for the Con Ed district steam system. So you know, we assume there are other efforts going on and policies and initiatives to deal with the cleaning of electric and district energy grids. But again, just be real clear in your proposal about your level of ambition.
And if the applicant is pursuing very innovative methods to procure renewable energy, whether it's thermal or electrical, you know, we're interested in understanding that as well. Though it's not the basis for the program, you know, we'd like to encourage innovativeness in that sphere as well.
Great. Well, I think that might be a good place to leave off. I'm going to actually leave the chat open for another 15 minutes, maybe till 11:30. So if anyone wants to continue submitting questions through the chat, you can feel free to do that. And then we'll basically compile all of the questions and answers and post that Q&A on the Empire Building Challenge website, as well as a copy of the webinar. So you still have time to submit some questions. And if not, you can always submit questions to ebc@nycerta.ny.gov. And we'll certainly make sure that we answer all questions that we receive today. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to thank Michael, Jared, and Adam for helping me field these questions. Much appreciated. And we look forward to your proposals. So thank you very much and have a good rest of your day.